Early Monday morning. The autumn sunlight filtered through Manhattan's skyscrapers, glinting against the shimmering facade of Harris Global, one of the world's leading technology conglomerates. The air radiated professionalism and power in the vast main lobby, with its gleaming marble floors and soaring glass walls. However, for Sophia Moore, a 25-year-old African-American woman, this was not where she felt she belonged. Today was her very first day working at the reception desk, and her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from her chest. Sophia had prepared meticulously for this day. She wore a navy blazer she had just bought at a discount store, paired with a gray pencil skirt borrowed from her best friend Aisha. Her natural curls were tied neatly into a low bun, and she wore thin-framed glasses to look more professional, just as her mother had advised. Yet, as she stood before the glass revolving doors of Harris Global, she felt smaller than ever. She took a deep breath and whispered, "You can do this, Sophia. Just don't do anything stupid." She stepped into the revolving door, a hot coffee in her left hand and her worn handbag in her right. But the door, as if intent on mocking her, spun faster than she expected. Sophia stumbled. Her bag caught in the glass, and her coffee teetered dangerously. "Oh, no, no, no," she muttered, struggling to regain balance. It was too late. The cup slipped from her hand, tracing a perfect arc through the air, before landing squarely on the polished leather shoes of a man standing just inside the lobby. Scalding coffee splattered, leaving a dark stain across the man's expensive Italian shoes. Sophia looked up. Her face flushed with mortification and met his eyes. He was tall, neatly combed dark brown hair, dressed in a tailored deep blue suit. His piercing blue eyes regarded her not with the anger she expected, but with a glimmer of surprise and faint amusement. "Don't worry," he said, his voice low and warm. These shoes needed a bit of character anyway. Sophia froze, her mouth opening, but no words forming. I'm so sorry," she stammered, crouching to blot the mess with a crumpled tissue from her bag. "I'll pay for cleaning, or buy you a new pair. I swear I didn't mean to." She realized she was apologizing to the shoes rather than the man, and her cheeks burned hotter. The man chuckled, a sound light, yet genuine. "Actually, I think they look more interesting now. Coffee's a bold choice." He bent down, offering her his hand. Sophia hesitated, then took it, feeling the quiet strength in his grip. "I'm Edward," he said, still smiling. "Sophia," she replied, trying to steady herself. "Sophia Moore, new receptionist, clearly very skilled at making first impressions." She gestured toward his shoes with a sheepish smile. Edward laughed louder, drawing glances from nearby employees. "I like memorable first impressions," he said with a nod. "Have a good first day, Sophia." Then he left her with a racing heart and the strange sense that she had just met someone significant. Sophia hurried to the reception desk, where she spilled. Sandra, a seasoned receptionist with sharp eyes and a touch of arrogance, met her coffee on someone's shoes on your first day. Sandra asked, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Welcome to Harris Global, where mistakes are never forgotten." "I know." Sophia sighed, sinking into a squeaky swivel chair. She checked her employee badge only to find it didn't work, and had to rely on Sandra to log her into the system. From the revolving door to the badge mishap, everything seemed stacked against her, but she was determined not to let her first day turn into a complete disaster. Amid the chaos of learning her duties, a man entered the lobby. Dressed in a gray suit with neatly combed hair, he began communicating in sign language, his gestures smooth and precise. Sophia recognized it instantly. Her grandmother Rose had been deaf since childhood, and those summer afternoons spent talking with her hands were some of Sophia's fondest memories. Sandra frowned and roared, "Sir, this is a reception, not a mime show." The man hesitated, a flicker of discomfort in his expression. The atmosphere grew tense. Sophia's heart beat faster. She rose, stepped forward, and said, "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" The man's face lit up, his smile blooming like he had just found an old friend. He signed back, and Sophia translated aloud for Sandra. "He has an appointment with the partnerships department. He's early and wants to confirm the contact name." Sandra, now blushing with embarrassment, nodded silently. Sophia checked the system, found the details, and signed them back to the man who introduced himself as Lucas, a company partner. With a grateful smile, Lucas departed, leaving Sophia to return to her desk, aware of curious eyes watching her. She didn't know that Edward Harris had witnessed the entire exchange from an executive corridor above the elevators. Edward, the 32-year-old billionaire behind Harris Global, was not known for his smiles or warmth. His reputation was that of a cold, calculating man who prized efficiency over emotion. But the moment he saw Sophia using sign language, something inside him shifted. He radioed his assistant, Will. "Will, I need information on the new receptionist. Name, education, background, everything. Especially why she knows sign language." Will, a middle-aged man of steadfast loyalty, hesitated. "Everything, sir. Everything," Edward replied, his eyes still fixed on Sophia as she adjusted her squeaky chair. In just a few seconds, he had been drawn into a story that would change his life forever. Meanwhile, Sophia tried to focus on her work at the reception desk, yet she couldn't erase Edward from her mind. His smile, deep voice, and the way he hadn't been angry when she spilled coffee on his shoes. Shaking her head, she muttered, "You're just a receptionist, Sophia. He's probably some director or something. Don't be ridiculous." But deep down, she felt a strange spark, as though fate had just knocked at her door. Noon at Harris Global was always bustling. The main lobby with its glass walls reflecting light, and the rhythmic click of shoes on marble, felt like a symphony of busyness. After hours of wrestling with the computer system and enduring the curious stares of her colleagues, Sophia Moore felt like a fish thrown into unfamiliar waters. She sat behind the reception desk, trying to memorize the instructions Sandra, the seasoned receptionist, had given her. But her mind drifted back to that moment earlier in the morning when she had accidentally spilled coffee on Edward's shoes. His smile, gentle, without a trace of blame, left her more unsettled than she wanted to admit. "Stop daydreaming, Sophia," she muttered, adjusting her glasses. "You're here to work, not to think about men in expensive suits." She opened the appointment list on the screen, trying to focus. A figure appeared at the reception desk, pulling her thoughts back into the present. The man before her wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, his dark hair neatly combed. Instead of speaking, he began signing with smooth, quick movements. Sophia instantly recognized sign language, the language she had learned as a child with her grandmother Rose. Memories of summer afternoons on the porch in Ohio, talking with her hands to her grandmother, came rushing back. She smiled, stood, and signed back. "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" The man's face lit up like he had found an old friend. He signed rapidly, and Sophia translated aloud so that Sandra, standing beside her with a puzzled expression, could understand. "His name is Lucas. He has a meeting with the partnerships department at 2 p.m. He wants to confirm the contact person and ask if he can meet earlier." Sophia checked the system, found the information, and signed back to Lucas. "The contact is Mrs. Claire Thompson. You can wait in the lounge, and I'll let her know you've arrived." Lucas nodded, his smile broadening. He signed, "Thank you. It's terrific to meet someone here who knows sign language." Sophia smiled in return. "I learned from my grandmother. It's my favorite way to talk with her." Lucas gave a grateful nod and walked toward the lounge with a newspaper. Sandra, now regaining her composure, looked at Sophia with a mix of surprise and envy. "Do you know sign language? Not bad for a newbie." Her tone carried a hint of sarcasm, but Sophia only smiled lightly. "I was just lucky to learn from someone special," she replied, turning back to the computer screen, trying to ignore the feeling that every eye in the lobby was on her. Edward Harris watched the entire scene from the corridor above, near the executive elevators. Hands in his pockets, his gaze was fixed on Sophia. The ease with which she communicated with Lucas, the sincerity in her gestures, something about it struck him deeply. Edward was not easily impressed. He had met hundreds of employees, partners, and investors in his decade running Harris Global. Yet, there was something about Sophia, a mix of clumsy charm and uncalculated kindness, that he couldn't look away from. Will Edward said into his radio, his voice low but firm, "I want more information on the new receptionist. Sophia Moore. Find out where she learned sign language and why she chose to work here." Edward's loyal assistant, Will, responded with a slight hesitation. "Yes, sir. I'll prepare a report right away." But is there a particular reason Edward didn't answer immediately? His eyes lingered on Sophia, now fumbling with a stack of papers. "Just curious," he said at last, though both men knew that wasn't the truth. Meanwhile, at the reception desk, Sophia felt the stark contrast between herself and the world around her. Harris Global was a place of expensive suits, million-dollar conversations, and judgmental eyes. With her discount blazer and worn flats, she felt like an outsider. The difference wasn't only in clothing or her modest background, but in how people looked at her, a black woman, in an environment where diversity was more often spoken of than truly present. Sophia sat alone in a corner of the cafeteria at lunch, nibbling on a homemade sandwich. She scrolled through her phone and read a message from her mother. "You're doing great, Sophie. Remember, you belong anywhere you choose to be." Sophia smiled faintly, though a trace of doubt still lingered inside her. She wasn't sure she truly belonged here. Just then, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Moore." Sophia saw a tall, slender blonde woman in an expensive business dress. She introduced herself. "I'm Eliza Morrison, Director of Communications. I heard you made quite the impression this morning." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold, scanning Sophia with sharp precision. "Oh, thank you," Sophia said, forcing a cheerful tone. "I was just lucky to know a little sign language." A little Eliza arched a brow. "I heard you saved the reception desk from an awkward situation. Not everyone could have done that." She smiled, though the smile never reached her eyes. "You're new. Harris Global can be overwhelming to those who aren't used to it." Sophia nodded, feeling a chill behind Eliza's words. "I'm learning every day," she said, steadying her voice. "But I like a challenge." "Good," Eliza replied, turning away, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and a wave of unease in Sophia's chest. What Sophia didn't know was that Eliza had once been Edward's girlfriend, and her arrival, even as just a receptionist, had already made Eliza feel threatened. By the end of the day, as Sophia prepared to leave, Lucas returned to the reception desk. He signed, "Thank you for your help today. You made me feel welcome." Sophia smiled, signing back, "It's my job. It was a pleasure meeting you, Lucas." As he walked away, a slight glow of pride warmed her. Even as a receptionist, she could still make a difference. Edward stood by the window in his office, looking down at the lobby. In his hand was the report Will had just delivered Sophia Moore. "I graduated with a degree in communications from the University of Ohio. Learned sign language from her grandmother. Raised in a working-class family in the suburbs. No prior experience at major corporations before Harris Global." Edward smiled, setting the report down. "She's a diamond in the rough," he murmured, and he knew then he wanted to know more about her. Tuesday morning at Harris Global began with a rare moment of calm for Sophia Moore. After 2 days filled with mishaps, from spilling coffee on Edward's shoes to the unexpected encounter with Lucas, she felt she was slowly adjusting to the company's rhythm. Though still a maze of appointments and phone calls, The reception desk no longer seemed quite intimidating. Sitting behind the counter, Sophia checked her emails, trying not to notice the squeak of her swivel chair each time she shifted. Today, no accidents, no trouble. Just do your job well, she told herself. But Harris Global never seemed short of surprises. At precisely 10 a.m., Will Edward Harris's assistant appeared at the reception desk. He wore a light gray suit, his expression severe, yet not unkind. Miss Moore, Will said, his voice calm but carrying authority. Mr. Harris would like to see you on the executive rooftop. Right now. Sophia looked up, still clutching her pen. The rooftop, she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Did I do something wrong? The image of coffee spilling over Edward's shoes replayed in her mind, making her pulse quicken. Will smiled faintly, softening his stern demeanor. No, it's not about that. He wants to discuss a project. You'll understand when you're up there. He gave her a slight nod, gesturing for her to follow. Sophia rose, straightened her blazer, and tried to mask her nerves confidently. But as she stepped into the executive elevator, she felt like she was entering another world. The mirrored walls reflected her image at her, a young woman with neatly tied curls, scuffed flats, and anxious eyes. She thought, I don't belong here, then quickly corrected herself. You were invited, Sophia. Do your best. The rooftop of Harris Global was an open space framed by tall glass windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. At the center stood a sleek oak table surrounded by leather chairs. Edward Harris stood by the window, his posture straight, hands in his pockets, gazing down at the restless city below. At the sound of Sophia's footsteps, he turned, a faint smile on his lips. Miss Moore, thank you for coming. Please call me Sophia, she replied, forcing her voice steady. And I'm still sorry about your shoes. Edward chuckled, the warm sound easing the tension. Those shoes survived. But that's not why I asked you here today. He gestured toward a chair across from the table. Have a seat. I have a proposal for you. Sophia sat, folding her hands tightly in her lap to hide her nerves. Edward joined her, his gaze steady, both serious and curious. I saw the way you communicated with Lucas yesterday, he began. The way you used sign language, your ease, your kindness, was remarkable. Harris Global is developing an inclusion program for people with disabilities, focusing on comprehensive communication, especially sign language. I want you to be part of it. Sophia blinked, trying to process his words. Be part of it? In what way? I'm just a receptionist. I don't have project management experience or anything like that. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. I'm honored you'd even consider me. But why me? Edward leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Because you have something not everyone does, sincerity. You don't just know sign language. You understand the value of making people feel heard. That's what I need for this project. A warmth spread through Sophia's chest, though a small voice whispered in her mind. This is Edward Harris's world. You're just an ordinary girl, Sophia. She took a deep breath, pushing aside her doubts. I'm honored, she said, but I need to know more about the project. What will it involve? Edward smiled clearly, pleased by her question. We want every Harris Global employee trained in inclusive communication, from basic sign language to assistive tools for people with disabilities. We'll also design visual communication systems in the office and ensure every company event includes sign language interpreters. You'll work with the partnerships and HR teams to roll it out. Sophia nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. We could start with short workshops teaching basic signs like hello and thank you. Maybe add visual guides in the main lobby so disabled visitors immediately feel welcomed. She stopped, realizing she was speaking too quickly. I mean, if you think that's okay. More than okay. Edward said, his eyes lighting up. In fact, I'd like you to present these ideas in Friday's management meeting. Could you prepare a plan by then? Friday? Sophia repeated, her nerves clashing with excitement. Yes. I'll do it. She smiled, though inside a wave of doubt rose. Could she really stand in front of executives in expensive suits who had never worried about affording a discounted blazer? Back at the reception desk, Sophia felt like she had just stepped out of a dream. Sandra glanced at her over the computer. Where'd you go looking like you just got promoted? Just a small meeting, Sophia said, with a guarded smile, sitting down to start sketching ideas for the project. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, Edward lingered by the window, gazing at the skyline. He thought about Sophia, the endearing clumsiness, the sincerity in her words, and how she made him feel lighter, as though he didn't have to be Edward Harris CEO all the time. But he also knew this project would thrust her into a world of pressure, where people like Eliza Morrison were always ready to make things difficult. When Eliza later heard about the inclusion project from a colleague, her brow furrowed. A receptionist leading a company initiative, she muttered, gripping her pen tightly. She knew Edward was behind the decision, and jealousy churned inside her. Who does she think she is, stepping into our world? Eliza felt a plan begin to form in her mind. By the end of the day, Sophia left Harris Global, passing through the revolving doors, without spilling a thing, a small victory. She looked at the Manhattan sky, painted gold by the setting sun. Inside her, a small flame had been lit. She didn't know if she had the strength to lead this project, but she knew one thing she wanted to try. And somewhere deep down, she felt Edward Harris's gaze like a silent encouragement. Friday morning at Harris Global glittered with sunlight, but inside Sophia Moore, a small storm was brewing. After 3 relentless days of preparation for the management team meeting, she felt both exhilarated and anxious. Her proposal for the inclusion program was complete, filled with detailed suggestions for sign language training, visual guides, and interactive workshops. She had practiced her presentation in front of the mirror dozens of times, but standing before senior executives still made her heart pound, like it would burst from her chest. Sophia entered the conference room on the 15th floor, where sunlight streamed through tall windows onto the gleaming wooden table. She tried to appear professional, dressed in a crisp white blouse and pencil skirt. The executives clad in expensive suits were already seated, their eyes sweeping over her with curiosity and skepticism. Edward Harris sat at the head of the table, his gaze gentle yet encouraging. "Miss Moore, we're ready to hear your presentation," he said, his steady voice calming her nerves. Sophia drew a deep breath and began. She spoke of the importance of inclusive communication, demonstrating basic sign language phrases like hello and thank you. She told the story of her grandmother, who had taught her that language was about words and connecting hearts. She concluded that when we create spaces where everyone feels heard, her voice trembling with emotion, we don't just build a better company, we make a stronger community. For a moment, the room was silent. Then applause broke out, led by Edward. A few executives nodded, clearly impressed. But then, Eliza Morrison, Director of Communications, rose to her feet. The smile on her lips was as sharp as a blade. "Very touching." "Miss Moore," Eliza said, her tone sweet, but edged with malice. "But I want to know if a brand new receptionist has the experience to lead a project of this scale. How long have you been here?" 3 days. The air tightened. Heat rushed to Sophia's face, but she held steady. "I understand your concern, Ms. Morrison," she replied clearly. "I may not have much experience at Harris Global, but I do have experience communicating with people who feel left behind. This project requires not only management skills, but empathy, and I can bring that." Edward nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. Miss Moore has presented a clear, feasible plan. She is the right person for this role. But Eliza pressed on. She arched an eyebrow, lowering her voice, as if confiding a secret. I only worry the project could be misinterpreted mainly when a junior employee suddenly receives so much attention from senior leadership. Her words struck like a hidden arrow, prompting uneasy glances among a few executives. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. She knew precisely what Eliza was implying, those absurd rumors that she was courting Edward's favor for personal gain. Clenching her fists, she forced her voice to remain calm. I am here to work, not to attract attention. If anyone doubts my ability, I am ready to prove myself through results, not appearances. The meeting ended with reluctant approval from the management team, but Sophia left with unease weighing heavily on her shoulders. She tried to focus back at the reception desk, though Eliza's words echoed in her mind. Sandra glanced at her tense expression. Rough meeting. You look like you just ran a marathon. Just an interesting one, Sophia replied with a strained smile. Inside, she felt like an outsider under a microscope, her presence questioned. Sophia received an email from Amanda Richardson, head of HR, that afternoon. The message was brief and cold. Miss Moore, please come to the HR office at 3 p.m. to discuss your role in the inclusion project. A knot tightened in her stomach. This was no ordinary meeting. Amanda sat behind her desk in the HR office with Eliza at her side, wearing a polished but insincere smile. Miss Moore and Amanda began, and we've received some concerns about your professionalism, particularly your relationship with Mr. Harris. Sophia blinked in shock. Relationship? I've only been working with him on the inclusion project. Eliza tilted her head, her tone dripping with mockery. Really? Because I've heard you've had several private meetings with him. A brand new receptionist, suddenly receiving special attention from the CEO. It's easy to misinterpret. Heat flared in Sophia's ears. I've done nothing to create any misunderstanding, she said firmly. Mr. Harris asked me to join the project because I know sign language and had ideas for the program. If you have evidence that I've misbehaved, present it. Otherwise, these accusations are unfair. Amanda frowned, visibly uncomfortable. We're not saying you've done anything wrong, Miss Moore. However, we may consider moving you to a different role with less direct contact with senior leadership to avoid potential controversy. Before Sophia could respond, the door swung open. Edward strode in, his gaze sharp as a storm. What is happening here? He demanded, his voice low but commanding. Amanda faltered, and Eliza forced a calm expression. Mr. Harris, we were merely discussing Miss Moore's suitability for the project. Suitability. Edward repeated, his eyes locking on Eliza. I personally appointed her to this project. If there is an issue, it should come directly to me. Why was I not informed? Eliza opened her mouth, but Edward cut her off with a raised hand. Miss Moore presented an excellent plan, which the management team approved. Are these accusations based on rumors? Speculation. His eyes bore into Eliza. Anyone with an issue with how I run this company can bring it to me directly. Sophia's heart pounded. Warmth flooded her chest at Edward's defense, though she knew it might only fuel the gossip. Thank you, Mr. Harris, she said softly but firmly. But I want to handle this myself. I'll prove my value through my work, not through arguments. Edward's gaze softened. I believe in you, he said, then turned back to Amanda and Eliza. This meeting is over. In the future, any concerns about this project will come to me first. He left, leaving behind a heavy silence. Returning to the reception desk, Sophia was awash with mixed emotions. She knew she had passed a trial, but also knew Harris Global would not readily accept her. As the day ended, she stood before the glass doors, her reflection staring back. You can do this, Sophia, she whispered, but you'll have to fight. And somewhere deep down, she felt Edward's gaze, a silent promise that she wouldn't fight alone. Wednesday afternoon at Harris Global carried a different kind of atmosphere. The small conference room on the 10th floor, usually reserved for strategy discussions, had been transformed into a special classroom. Tables were pushed against the walls, replaced by a neat circle of chairs where a group of employees sat waiting. At the center stood Sophia Moore, a whiteboard behind her, marked with basic sign language symbols. Hello, thank you. What's your name? This was the very first training session of the inclusion program she was leading, and though she had prepared carefully, she still felt as if she were stepping onto a stage. Sophia wore a light blue blouse and a pencil skirt, her curls tied high to keep her face clear while she signed. She took a deep breath and smiled at the group ranging from administrative assistants to a few mid-level managers. Good afternoon, everyone. She began, her voice steady but faintly nervous. Today we're going to learn how to communicate without words. Sign language isn't just about moving your hands. It's about connecting with people we may have overlooked. Ready? The employees nodded, some curious, others skeptical. But the atmosphere began to lighten when Sophia demonstrated hello, a simple gesture of raising the hand near the forehead. She walked around the room, gently correcting their movements, encouraging them with a warm smile. Great. Now let's try to thank you. Touch your chin, then move your hand outward as if sending gratitude straight from your heart. The biggest surprise of the session was the arrival of Edward Harris. He stepped into the room 10 minutes after the class began, sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, looking far more relaxed than in his usual suits. I'm not interrupting, am I? He asked, his gaze brushing over Sophia with a faint smile. Not at all, Mr. Harris, Sophia replied, trying to sound professional despite her racing heart. Please join us. We're learning the sign for thank you. She pointed to an empty chair, and Edward sat down immediately, drawing whispers from the group. It wasn't every day the CEO joined a training session. Sophia continued, though she couldn't help noticing Edward's efforts. He observed intently, attempting to mimic the signs, his movements stiff like someone solving a puzzle with his hands. When she asked the group to practice, "What's your name?" Edward raised his hand and tried, but his gestures were slow and awkward. The room erupted in laughter, and even Sophia found herself laughing along. What Edward asked, pretending to frown, though the corners of his mouth lifted. Did I get it wrong? Not wrong, Sophia said, walking toward him. But it looks like you're trying to negotiate with your own hand. The room chuckled again as she gently placed her hand over his, adjusting the angle of his fingers. There, this is the right way. The instant her hand touched his, a spark shot through her. She quickly pulled away, returning to the whiteboard. Edward smiled, repeating the sign with noticeable improvement. Better, he asked, his eyes never leaving hers. Much better, Sophia replied, keeping her tone calm. She returned to the group, guiding them through more signs, but Edward's presence distracted her. He wasn't just sitting in, he was genuinely engaged, asking questions, even laughing heartily when one employee accidentally signed mother instead of friend. By the end of the session, employees left the room smiling, energized by the new skill. Edward lingered, helping Sophia clear the chairs and wipe down the board. You did wonderfully, he said sincerely. Everyone was engaged. I haven't seen them laugh that much during training before. Thank you, Sophia replied, stacking her papers. But honestly, I was trying not to mess it all up. She laughed lightly, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of self-doubt. I still don't know if I really belong here. Everyone else. They seem to live in a different world. Edward paused, studying her intently. A different world. What do you mean? Sophia hesitated, then decided to be honest. I mean people like you with expensive suits and offices overlooking the city. I grew up in a small house where we sometimes had to choose between paying the electricity bill and buying groceries. Places like this. They don't feel like they're meant for people like me." Edward was silent for a moment before replying. "You know, my sister Emma used to feel the same way. She's lived with a disability since childhood, and my family, we didn't always know how to make her think she belonged. It took me years to learn how to connect with her. And people like you who communicated from the heart taught me." Sophia looked at him, surprised by his openness. "You learned sign language because of your sister." "Partly," Edward admitted. "But today I'm here because of you. I want to learn from you, Sophia. You make it all feel natural." Her pulse quickened at his words. She wanted to respond, but another voice cut through. "What a touching little session." Eliza Morrison's voice came from the doorway, sweet but sharp. "I didn't realize Mr. Harris was interested in grassroots projects." Edward turned his tone calm yet firm. "Eliza, inclusion isn't grassroots. It's the future of this company." He glanced back at Sophia, his look reassuring. "Miss Moore, I look forward to your next session." Eliza smiled thinly, her eyes locked on Sophia. "Of course. I only hope everyone remembers to stay professional." With that, she turned and left, tension trailing in her wake. Sophia stood frozen, feeling like she had just fought an invisible battle. She glanced at Edward, who was setting the last marker back on the table. "She doesn't like me, does she?" Sophia asked quietly. Edward sighed. "Eliza doesn't like anyone who threatens her world. Don't let it bother you. You're doing the right thing." He paused, his gaze warm. "And I'm here, Sophia. You're not alone." The golden sunset poured over the Manhattan skyline as she left the conference room. Stepping into the elevator, Sophia carried a new sense of connection to Edward, not just as a colleague, but as someone who understood the value of sincerity. Yet deep inside, she knew his world, full of Elizas and unspoken expectations, would not readily accept her. She clutched her notes folder, whispering, "Keep going, Sophia. You can do this." Saturday evening, at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel in the heart of Manhattan, shimmered like a light painting. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, casting warm golden reflections onto the polished wooden floor of the ballroom. Harris Global was hosting its annual gala to connect with investors and clients, and the atmosphere brimmed with elegance and high society conversations. Sophia Moore stood before the mirror in her small Queens apartment, her heart pounding as she prepared for the event. She had never imagined being invited to a place like this. But Edward Harris had personally asked her to attend, telling her, "You're an essential part of the inclusion project. I want you there." Sophia chose a deep blue evening gown, simple yet graceful, borrowed from her best friend Aisha. Aisha said, "You look like a movie star," as she helped her try it on. But in the mirror, Sophia only saw a young woman trying to fit into a world that wasn't hers. She tied her curls into a low bun, put on small silver earrings, her grandmother's gift, and slipped into flats instead of heels. "No extra risks," she muttered, recalling her near falls in high heels. It felt like stepping into a Hollywood film when Sophia entered the ballroom. Guests in dazzling attire chatted animatedly, glasses of champagne glinting in their hands. She recognized a few faces from the company, but most were strangers, people in tuxedos and gowns, worth more than her rent for months. Across the room, Edward stood among a group of investors. Dressed in a black tuxedo, he looked both powerful and approachable. When his eyes found hers, he smiled and beckoned her over. "Sophia, you made it," Edward said warmly. "Allow me to introduce you." He guided her to a circle of investors, presenting her as the lead of Harris Global's inclusion program. Sophia smiled, forcing confidence as she shook each hand, though she couldn't ignore the curious eyes studying her, as if trying to decide where she belonged in this glittering world. The conversation flowed smoothly, until disaster struck. Sophia accidentally spilled her glass of juice onto the white silk gown of a nearby woman. The bright orange stain spread across the fabric. Sophia froze, her cheeks burning. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing napkins. "I'll pay for dry cleaning, or buy you a new dress." The woman turned out to be Margaret Harris Edwards' mother. She glanced at the stain, then suddenly laughed a deep, genuine laugh. "Don't worry, young lady," she said, her eyes sparkling. "This dress was too tight anyway, and I was looking for an excuse to leave early. You've just done me a favor." She patted Sophia's shoulder kindly, surprising her with such warmth. Nearby, Edward laughed as well. "Mother, are you sure you're all right?" he asked, though his gaze was fixed on Sophia, full of sympathy and amusement. "I'm fine," Margaret assured him, then leaned closer to Sophia and whispered, "You bring a little color to this party. Don't stop being yourself." With that, she left, leaving Sophia both relieved and bewildered. But not everyone was so forgiving. Eliza Morrison had been watching from across the room, her eyes cold behind a champagne glass. When Edward was pulled into another conversation, Eliza approached Sophia, her voice sugar-coated but sharp as a blade. "Another accident, Miss Moore," she said. "You do have a talent for turning things into chaos." Sophia tightened her grip on her glass, forcing calm. "It wasn't intentional, Ms. Morrison, just an accident." "An accident," Eliza echoed, raising a brow. "You know, accidents like this can make people wonder if you really belong here. Harris Global is a prestigious company, and image is everything." Heat rushed to Sophia's ears, but she refused to back down. "I'm here for my work, not for appearances. If you have a problem with me, please let me know." Her steady voice matched her unflinching gaze. Eliza smiled thinly, her eyes glittering with malice. "Oh, I only worry about the company. And Edward, he could get distracted by things that don't belong." She turned away, leaving Sophia chilled as if doused with ice water. Later, Edward found Sophia standing alone by the balcony, gazing at the city lights. "Are you all right?" he asked, stepping closer. "I saw you talking to Eliza. She didn't give you a hard time, did she?" Sophia shook her head, though her eyes betrayed her hurt. "She thinks I don't belong here. And maybe she's right. I'm not used to parties like this or people like this. I'm just an ordinary girl, Edward." Edward moved closer, his eyes sincere. "Sophia, you are not just ordinary. You made my mother laugh, something I rarely see. You're changing the way this company thinks about communication. You belong anywhere you choose to be." His words made her heart race. She met his gaze and saw pure honesty free of pretense. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Where I grew up, parties were backyard birthdays with homemade cake and old speakers. I don't know how to fit into your world." Edward smiled gently. "My world. It isn't as glamorous as it looks. It's full of pressure, expectations, and people like Eliza who always try to control everything. But you, Sophia, you remind me that there are more important things, like sincerity, like making people feel heard." Sophia looked at him, sensing the distance between them shrink. "You make me feel like I can do anything," she admitted, a small smile breaking her face. "Because you can," Edward replied, his gaze unwavering. "And I want to be there to see you do it." Music swelled as they returned to the ballroom, and Edward suddenly extended his hand. "Dance with me," he asked. Sophia blinked in surprise. "I'm not a good dancer. I'll step on your feet." "I can handle it," Edward teased with a grin. "Think of it as payback for my shoes." She laughed, placing her hand in his. As they stepped onto the dance floor, Sophia could feel Eliza's eyes on her from across the room. But for once, she didn't care. In that moment, with Edward's hand holding hers, she felt like she truly belonged, not to Harris Global, but to something deeper, something the two of them were only beginning to discover. The following Monday at Harris Global felt heavier than usual. The lobby still sparkled with glass walls and the reflections on polished marble floors. But to Sophia Moore, it was as if an invisible cloud hung over her head. After the company gala, whispers about her and Edward Harris had begun to spread like drafts of wind rushing through the halls. Some colleagues looked at her curiously, others avoided her, as though she were the center of a story no one dared to say aloud. Sophia tried to focus on her receptionist duties and the inclusion project, but every glance, every hushed word made her feel like she was under a magnifying glass. As she organized appointments on her computer, Sandra, the veteran receptionist, leaned close and whispered, "Miss Moore, do you know what people are saying? They're saying you and Mr. Harris have something." Sophia froze her fingers, halting on the keyboard. "Something? What do you mean?" Sandra shrugged her eyes, both curious and cautious. "Just rumors, but Ms. Morrison has been saying things to HR. You should be careful." The warning tightened Sophia's stomach. She had known Eliza Morrison disliked her, but she hadn't expected her to move this quickly. Before she could process it further, an email popped up from Amanda Richardson, head of HR. "Miss Moore, please come to the HR office at 2 p.m. to discuss your role in the inclusion project." With its stark white walls and cold fluorescent lights, the HR office felt more like a courtroom. Amanda sat behind her desk, a folder in hand, her expression severe. Eliza stood in the corner in a beige business dress, her smile as icy as glass. Miss Moore and Amanda began evenly. "We've received additional reports about your behavior concerning Mr. Harris. It appears your relationship with him is affecting the company's professional image." Sophia clenched her hands, steadying her voice. "I don't understand. I've only worked with Mr. Harris on the inclusion project. Everything has been strictly professional." Eliza stepped forward, her voice sweet but razor sharp. "Really, Miss Moore? Because I heard you and Edward were very close at the gala. The hand-holding, the dancing, hardly the behavior of a receptionist. Wouldn't you agree?" The accusation cut like a knife. Heat rushed to Sophia's face, but she refused to be pulled into anger. "Ms. Morrison, I was invited to that event as part of the project team. If you have evidence that I acted inappropriately, present it. Otherwise, these are baseless assumptions." Amanda cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable. "We're not saying you've done anything wrong. But to protect the company's reputation, we recommend transferring you to another department where you won't work directly with senior leadership." It felt like the floor dropped from under Sophia's feet. She had poured her heart into the inclusion project, only to be pushed aside because of unfounded rumors. Before she could respond, the door swung open. Edward Harris entered, his controlled fury palpable. "Amanda! Eliza! What exactly is going on here?" His voice was low, sharp. Amanda faltered, while Eliza kept her composure. "Mr. Harris, we ensured professionalism is maintained in the company," Amanda said carefully. Edward's eyes locked on Eliza. "Professionalism? Or are you punishing an employee over baseless gossip?" He turned to Sophia, his tone softening. "Miss Moore, do you want to say anything?" Sophia straightened, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. "I've given everything I have to this project. I'm not here to cause trouble or seek personal gain, but if the company believes I'm a problem, I won't stay and become a burden." She paused, inhaling deeply. "I resign." The room froze. Edward stepped forward, urgency in his tone. "Sophia, you don't have to do this. You're an essential part of this project, of this company." But Sophia shook her head, her eyes resolute. "Thank you, Mr. Harris, for believing in me. But I can't remain where my worth is questioned because of rumors. I need to be somewhere I can work without looking over my shoulder." She left the office with her head held high, though her chest was heavy. Back at the reception desk, she began packing her things. Sandra watched with worried eyes. "Are you sure, Sophia? You were doing so well." Sophia gave her a sad smile. "I'm sure. Some places need me more." A few days later, Sophia received an email from Lucas, the client she had helped with sign language on her first day. He invited her to join a nonprofit organization in Seattle, leading inclusion programs for tech companies. The role matched her skills and allowed her to continue the mission she was passionate about. After a night of thought, Sophia replied, "I accept. I'll be in Seattle next week." As she closed her suitcase in her small apartment, Sophia felt relief mingled with regret. She thought of Edward, his smile, his unwavering support, those brief moments when it felt like they truly understood each other. But she also knew his world, with its judging eyes and invisible expectations, wasn't a place she could belong easily. Before leaving New York, Sophia left a handwritten letter at the reception desk, asking Sandra to deliver it to Edward. It read, "Edward, thank you for giving me the opportunity and trust. You helped me see my own worth, and because of that, I must find a place where I can shine without doubt. I wish you all the best. Sophia." Edward held the letter in his top-floor office, reading the words repeatedly. He looked out at the Manhattan skyline, feeling something precious had slipped from his grasp. He murmured that she chose her path, but his eyes betrayed his regret. For the first time, Edward Harris felt powerless in the face of something money and influence could never fix. A drizzle fell over the streets of Seattle as Sophia Moore checked her email one last time before closing her suitcase. An unexpected invitation from Harris Global had kept her awake for nights. She was asked to be a keynote speaker at the National Corporate Inclusion Conference in New York, an event gathering CEOs, activists, and experts in inclusive communication. The letter, signed by a senior executive, emphasized that her talk would focus on the practical implementation of inclusion programs in the tech industry. But what made her heart race was the final line. The conference will open with a speech by CEO Edward Harris on the future of inclusive communication. Sophia shut her laptop and looked out the window of her small Capitol Hill apartment. She had built a new life in Seattle, with meaningful work and colleagues who valued her. But the name Edward Harris blew through her like a sudden wind, unsettling everything. "It's just a conference," she told herself. "I'll do my job well and come back." But deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. The flight from Seattle to New York felt longer than it was, not because of the hours, but because of the turmoil in her mind. Sitting by the window, watching clouds drift past, she wondered if Edward knew she was coming. Had he arranged this invitation, or was it a mere coincidence? When the plane landed, she took a deep breath, adjusted her new navy blazer, and stepped out of JFK Airport, ready to face her past. The hotel hosting the conference stood in the heart of Manhattan, its grand lobby adorned with posters promoting inclusion. Sophia checked in, trying not to be overwhelmed by the luxury. In her room, she practiced her speech in front of the mirror, repeating lines like, "Inclusion is not just a policy, but the way we build communities." Yet every time she met her eyes in the mirror, she saw Edward, his smile, sincerity, and shared moments. The conference was held in a sleek convention center, drawing hundreds of attendees, from executives in tailored suits to activists in simple t-shirts. Sophia checked the schedule. Her speech was set for the afternoon, while Edward's opening address was at 10 a.m. "I can avoid him," she thought. "Arrive later, give my talk, and leave." But that plan dissolved when she stepped into the hallway and heard his voice echo through the loudspeakers. "Good morning." Edward's deep, steady voice filled the hall. "I'm Edward Harris, and today I want to share about someone who changed how I see communication." Sophia stopped in her tracks, her heart hammering. Quietly, she slipped into the back of the hall, standing in the shadows, praying he wouldn't see her. On stage, Edward wore a deep blue suit, commanding yet approachable. He spoke about the importance of inclusive communication. Then his tone softened. A remarkable woman once taught me that communication isn't only words, it's about truly seeing one another. She welcomed a guest without hesitation using sign language. She made me realize that no company can be strong if it doesn't listen to everyone. Sophia's throat tightened. She knew he was speaking about her. At the side of the stage, an interpreter signed every word, and the sight struck her. Harris Global had truly changed. Pride swelled in her chest as she saw her ideas brought to life. But when Edward's gaze swept the audience and landed on her, his voice trembled slightly. "That woman changed not only my company, but me," he said. "And I hope she knows that wherever she is." Thunderous applause filled the hall. But for Sophia, the world narrowed to just her and Edward. She slipped toward a side exit, but he was quicker. As she stepped into the corridor, Edward was already there, still wearing his lapel microphone, his eyes a mix of surprise and joy. "Sophia," he whispered, "you came. You invited me," she replied, keeping her tone steady despite her racing heart. "Your speech. It was terrific." Edward stepped closer, his gaze fixed on her. Every word was accurate. "I learned from you, Sophia, about communication, kindness, about everything." He hesitated as if wrestling with himself. "I've missed you." A wave of emotion surged through her, but she shook her head. "Edward, don't. I have a life in Seattle, my work colleagues, projects I love. I can't just come back because of feelings." Edward's eyes shone with sincerity and pain. "I'm not asking you to come back for me. I only want you to know you changed me. Harris Global now has interpreters at every event and visual guides in every office. All because of you." Sophia smiled softly, though sorrow tinged her expression. "I'm proud of that. But we belong to different worlds, Edward. You're the CEO of an empire. I'm just a woman trying to do what's right." "Just," Edward repeated, his voice low but firm. "Sophia, you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. Not because of your work, but because of how you make people feel seen." She turned away, blinking back tears. She said I needed to prepare for my speech, but her voice was unsteady. "Thank you, Edward, for seeing me." She left him standing there, his eyes following her, with unmasked sorrow. Backstage, Sophia readied herself. Facing the mirror, she adjusted her blazer, reciting her opening lines. But her mind swirled with Edward's words, his gaze, honesty, and the hope he stirred in her heart. "Focus, Sophia," she told herself. "You're here for your work, not for him." When she stepped onto the stage, hundreds of eyes turned toward her. Yet she knew Edward was watching somewhere in the crowd, which gave her strength. She began her speech, her voice clear and passionate. "Inclusion is not optional. Our responsibility is to ensure everyone is heard, seen, and valued." As she signed "thank you" to conclude, the entire hall applauded. But her eyes sought only one face, Edward's. He was smiling pride, and something deeper shining in his eyes. Something that looked very much like love. A golden autumn afternoon bathed Central Park, New York, as sunlight filtered through the trees, scattering shimmering light across the ground. The wedding of Lucas, the friend Sophia had once helped with sign language at Harris Global, was held in a quiet spot near the lake. Simple folding chairs, wildflowers in glass jars, and a small band playing gentle melodies created a warm, intimate atmosphere. Just back from Seattle after the conference, Sophia stood among the crowd, her heart lighter than it had been when she left New York. She wore a pale floral dress and comfortable flats, and she smiled when she saw Lucas the groom sign thank you to her from afar. Lucas had invited her over a video call, and his excitement was evident when he announced his wedding to Hannah, a woman he had met during an inclusive art project. "You have to come." Lucas had signed, his eyes glowing. "You were the one who made me feel welcome at Harris Global. This wedding wouldn't be complete without you." Sophia couldn't refuse, though the thought of returning to New York brought the nervous possibility of seeing Edward Harris again. When she arrived at the ceremony, laughter and music filled the air. Lucas and Hannah stood under a floral arch, exchanging tender glances. Sophia signed congratulations, and Hannah responded with a warm embrace. But while she was chatting with another guest, a familiar voice sounded behind her. "Sophia, you're here." She turned, her heartbeat quickening, as she saw Edward Harris. He wore a simple gray suit, yet still carried an irresistible charm. "Edward," she breathed, trying to steady her voice. "What are you doing here?" "Lucas invited me," he replied, a gentle smile forming. "And I hoped I'd see you." Before Sophia could respond, Hannah appeared, signing quickly, "I told Lucas to invite him. You two need to talk." Sophia glanced at Hannah, then back at Edward, feeling like she had been lovingly set up. They slipped away from the crowd, walking along the lake shore, where ducks glided peacefully. "I heard you've been doing amazing things in Seattle." Edward began, his voice soft. "You're changing the world just like I knew you would." Sophia smiled, though her eyes carried a hint of sadness. "Thank you, but I don't know if I'm changing the world. I'm just trying to do what's right." She paused, gazing at the sparkling water. "And you? How is Harris Global?" Edward stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "The company is changing because of you, but I'm not here to talk about business. Sophia, I've thought a lot since the conference. About you. About us. What could happen if we stopped letting distance hold us apart?" Sophia shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. "Edward, we've had this conversation. You have an empire to run. I have my work in Seattle. We can't just ignore reality." Edward said, "I'm not talking about ignoring it," determination threading his tone. "I'm talking about building something together. Harris Global is expanding to the West Coast. We need a national director for inclusion programs, and no one is better suited than you. You could continue your work in Seattle, and I'd split my time between both cities. We don't have to choose between your world and mine. We can create one together." Sophia stared at him, her heart pounding. "You're serious? You'd change your life?" "For me." Edward smiled, sincerity glowing in his eyes. "Sophia, you changed me when you spilled juice on my mother's dress. You made me want to be the best version of myself. I don't want to lose you again." Just then, a joyful shriek rang out from the wedding crowd. A guest had accidentally toppled the wedding cake, sending cream and strawberries flying everywhere. Sophia burst out laughing, and Edward joined in, their laughter mingling like music. "See," she said, pointing at the mess. "This wedding is precisely my kind of thing, chaotic but joyful." Edward took her hand, pulling her closer. "Sophia, I can't promise perfection, but I promise we'll turn every mess into joy together." He knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside, a simple silver ring sparkled in the sunlight. "Sophia, more, will you make me the happiest man alive by being my partner in everything, no matter how many accidents come our way?" Sophia covered her mouth, tears blurring her vision. She knelt too, so they were eye to eye. Her voice trembled. "Edward Harris, you're proposing to me with cake cream on your shoes during a chaotic wedding, and you think I'll say yes?" "I'm hoping so," he said, grinning widely. Through her tears, Sophia laughed and nodded. "Yes, I say yes. yes to love the future, and everything will build together. Edward slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into an embrace, both laughing aloud amid the joyful chaos of the wedding. A year later, in a small garden on the outskirts of New York, Sophia and Edward stood beneath a simple flower arch surrounded by family and friends. Sophia wore an elegant white gown, beside her grandmother Rose, who looked beautiful with a radiant smile. Lucas and Hannah were there, along with Margaret Harris, who had become one of Sophia's strongest supporters. Even Eliza Morrison had sent a heartfelt apology letter, admitting her jealousy and offering her blessing. During the vows, Sophia both spoke and signed. Edward, you've shown me that love doesn't have to be perfect. It must be true. I promise to stand by you no matter how many accidents come our way. Edward, his sign language now fluent, replied Sophia, you are my most beautiful accident. I promise to build with you a world where everyone is heard. As they kissed, the garden erupted with applause and a sea of I love you signs from their guests. Sophia looked at Edward, knowing they had found each other not only in love, but in a shared mission. And as the sunset bathed the garden in gold, she whispered, thank you, Grandma Rose. You were right. Someone will always understand when we speak from the heart.